Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to see how we can combine shapes to make more complicated shapes in Illustrator, and we're also briefly going to touch on how we duplicate objects as well to save us from going crazy with cut and paste. First off, let's have a look at an example that we're going to work toward. In this file here called Infographic AI, we have a very simple infographic that deals with the fact that 75% of all drownings in 2016 in New Zealand were preventable. This area from here to here represents 75% of the total area of this circle. Right, how do we do that? Over here, in this artboard, we have a single circle. I can see its width and height, and I can see that it has a black stroke with a slightly grey fill to it. Now, the reason why I've given it a slightly grey fill is so that we can differentiate it from the background. It doesn't really matter what colour it is, and any colour will work in this example. So first of all, how do we duplicate? Normally, we think that we get an object and we go edit, copy, and edit, paste. And magically somewhere, and normally with all Adobe programs, you get something that is pasted right to the center of the screen. I'll get rid of that. We also see in Illustrator that there's the ability to go edit, paste in front. Now what has happened is that there are now two copies and they're both occupying exactly the same space. Now the way that I can prove that is if I come over here to my layers palette, we can see there actually are two ellipses, one on top of the other. I'll get rid of that. We also see, select the object again, that we can paste in back, which will obviously put it behind this object in the same place, and we can paste in place, which will give it to us again in exactly the same place and on top. Now, why the difference between pasting in place and pasting in front? Paste in place you'll see in many Adobe applications, and it relates to if we're going to go to another artboard or if we're going to go to another page. So I can copy something from one page and I can paste it in exactly the same place in another page. But we won't look at that at this moment. Instead, we're going to look at how we can copy our objects in a far faster mechanism. I'm going to use my selection tool. I've got the selection tool. Normally I can click and drag and it moves the item. In this case, I'm also going to add the modifier key of holding down the option. We see that the mouse pointer, it changes, so there is a little wee ghost sitting behind it, and that's giving us a visual feedback to tell us we're about to copy something. If I now click and drag, I get another copy, and I can continue doing that again and again and again. If I select all of these, I can repeat the process, and before too long I can have any number of duplicates. Let's undo all of that. What we do have with Adobe Illustrator is that the first time that I have duplicated something, I have, of course, equal spacing between these things. If I wanted a third thing and I want to continue that equal spacing, I might need to start using the align tools. Instead of doing that, what Adobe have provided for us is that after we have duplicated something the first time, we can use the modifier keys of Command and D, and it will complete the same command again and again and again with the same spacing applied, which is fantastic. So I can now, that there is going to be a sense of order with what I'm doing, and it now starts to be more of a repeating pattern. Let's undo all of that. Let's look at our infographic again. Here I'm wanting to make the appearance of waves. The reason why I'm using a circle is that that is an easy way to achieve it. I hold down the Option key and I'm thinking about how I want the peaks and the troughs of the wave to appear. So what I'm looking at is this area here where the lines intersect. If I select both, I did that by holding down the Shift key and clicking, we see that we have this space here. It begins to look like a wave. Let's undo. I'll repeat that one more time. There we go. And now if I go D, 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 and we select all of those, we see that wave shape. But at the moment, these are all individual items. In the infographic here, if I select that, it is just one item, one continuous shape. The way that we combine these separate elements into one thing is by using a palette called the Pathfinder. So let's have a look at that. If I go up to Window, and we see here, there is this option, Pathfinder. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undock the Pathfinder from the palettes here, and I'm going to bring it closer to my objects, so our screen isn't going to move around so much. The way that I undock it is that I click and I drag it away. There it is now as an individual menu item. So what does the Pathfinder do? Let's look at this top row first. We have the idea to unite, minus front, intersect, and exclude. Now these are abstract ideas. Let's see how they work. I'll duplicate this, and I'll duplicate this. I wish to keep this group together. Uniting means joining things two things together. If I have this, and I shift select this, and I click on this button here, they have now become one object. If I go now to the layers, we see that here there is something called path. And a path, you should know, is made by the pen tool. Let's look at some other options. Again, I'm going to duplicate this object and this object. Next to uniting is this thing called minusing. So we are subtracting the front element from the back element. So if I select that, we see that this is in front of that. They don't have to be right next to each other. I could subtract this element from that element as long as they were touching or overlapping each other. This and this. I click minus front, and it takes that front shape and uses it as a tool to take a bite out of the lower shape. I'll undo that. If I had this on top of that, then I would get this result. The next tool along doesn't take the big part out of either piece. Instead, what it does is it looks at where is the overlap. So here, and I'll just select these two objects, and for this moment I will just take out this fill color. I click on none, and now we can see there is this shape here. That is what will be left behind. So, making sure they're both selected, I click on intersect, and that is exactly what we have. And let's look at the final one. This and this, and I click on exclude. Exclude is the opposite of intersect. So again, we will have these outers, but we won't have this inner area. Whenever I use these tools, we see that sometimes they're going to be called a path, or they're going to be called a group. A group has a little arrow next to it because inside there we have piece A and we have piece B. If I get this, making sure I have both pieces, object, and done group, I can actually move them apart from each other if I so desire. Now, let's continue. First, I'm going to make the waves. Well, I select all of these, and I'm going to choose this as my option, and it makes a rather flat looking cloud. I am now, with zooming out, I'm now going to make a larger circle. I'm going to make sure that this object, here it is going to be on top of the ellipse. I am making sure that there is an overlap of the foreground object to the background object. I select this, and I select this, and I click on minus. I have the shape that I am looking for, and I also have a little bit left over. It's created that group that I said, so I'm going to expand that out. I'm going to get this top element, and I'm going to press the delete key. It is now gone, and I now have the size that I want. If we look at infographic one more time, we see there is a background color. To get that, it's a simple matter. I just need to have a circle that is going to be the same size as this shape that I've just created with the Pathfinder. I'm using the Shift key to make sure I constrain my proportions, and I'm also adding the spacebar so I can move the object I'm drawing about. There we go. There is a pretty good scale. It is only, sadly, in front of. So I'm going to drag this below there, and now I have my objects in the order that I need them to be in. If I select them both, and I take away the stroke, I select the front, making sure I choose the fill color. I can now set that to a color of my preference, and the background again the same way. If I wanted to add texture to these shapes, I would follow my tutorial on how to add texture to color.